Hey guys, welcome back to another painting video. My name's Corey J and I'll be your teacher today. In today's class, we're going to talk about painting portraits. So all about how to paint portraits, where to start, and I'm going to give you a couple tips and tricks about how I paint portraits and what works for me. To start, I just want to talk about this reference photo that I've selected to use today for my portrait. Now, I picked this reference photo for a couple of different reasons, and I wanted to share those with you. The first reason I chose this photo is because the model's face is positioned at a 3/4 degree angle. And that's really pleasing to the eye, and it's also quite a bit easier to paint versus, for example, a portrait that's head on or a portrait that's all the way to the side. It just gives more information and is a lot more pleasing. The second reason why I chose this image is because of the expression. I really like the happy, uplifted expression, and I also like that the woman is wearing glasses and that she has her mouth open, so I can give you some tips and tricks about how to paint mouths as well as teeth. Now, for this one, we won't be able to talk about painting eyes, but hopefully from my other videos, you've started to gain a grasp about how to paint eyes. One last reason why I chose this reference photo is because the features on this lady's face can be adapted to a darker skin tone. So if you wanted to practice painting a deeper or darker skin tone with this piece instead of the light skin tone that I painted, you could go ahead and do that by still using the same reference photo. Now, if you're not sure how to mix skin tones from scratch, I have a whole video about that, so you can check that out. It'll be linked below. Another thing I wanted to discuss about this piece is that it took me about 8 hours to paint in total. So this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. You want to go slower and take your time with it, and you want to really build up the layers when you're painting. So you'll do a couple layers and then you might redo those layers on top and continue on, and that's really how you get the nice dimension and the smooth transitions in your piece. So it's definitely going to start going through an ugly stage for sure. Portraits always go through an ugly stage. It's really bad at first. It looks really gross, but if you just push through, you'll start to see it come together. Okay, so without further ado, let's get right into the video. I'm going to start off today by using this green painter's tape to create a border around my paper and also to keep it nice and sturdy as I paint. Now I just overlapped the painter's tape 1/4 of an inch all the way around, and that helps to create a nice little thin border and also so my paper doesn't warp or wobble. And I'm using a 9x12 piece of canvas paper by Fredericks. Next, I'm going to take a little cup here and add in a little bit of pink, and also I'm going to add a little bit of water to the cup too, just about this much. And then I'm going to mix the paint together with the water to create a glaze for the background of this piece that I'm going to lay down before I do any drawing or anything. Now I'm just going to get it nice and watery and run it all over the back. Now I chose pink because pink is an undertone to the skin tone color that I'll be painting, and that'll be the majority of the painting on this piece. So you want to choose a color that is light enough to be a background color, and then also a color that reflects whatever your subject is that you're painting. So pink works well for me. And I'm just going to lay down it pretty loosely here, and then I just like to do these nice, really light strokes with an almost clean brush all the way across to pick up any excess paint. And then you want to let that dry completely before you move on to your next task. Okay, so to start, you want to do a drawing of your portrait, and this drawing we're going to transfer over and work through in layers. So I'm not going to transfer this whole image over to the background to start. I'm going to be strategic about when I transfer different parts of it. So I suggest that you use a grid method or you trace the image so that you know that it's going to be fairly accurate. Because you are drawing a portrait, you do want it to be accurate and represent the person that you're trying to emulate. So here, I'm just going to start off by using this carbon transfer paper, and I'm only going to transfer the outline of areas that have skin tone. So I'm only going to go all the way around the perimeter and do an outline of everywhere that's their skin tone. And here in the hairline, I'm going a little bit into the hairline past where the skin tone is, because I know I can cover that up with the hair, and I don't want any awkward areas between the hair and the skin tone, like the forehead, for example. And then I'm doing the arms and the neck, and I'm just doing an outline of these things. As you can see right here, I just have a plain outline. Now I'm going to grab a little piece of canvas paper to test my colors on, and a container with a lid. It's very important that you have a lid for this one, as this painting is going to be quite a lengthy one. You want to make sure that you have something that you can close and that will be airtight. Now I started off with mixing together this yellow and this pink, and I made a blob in the container, and I'm mixing it together with the palette knife so that I don't lose as much paint as I would if I was mixing with a brush. But then I realized that I didn't have enough paint, so I went back and added some more pink and some more yellow, and you'll notice that I actually did this 3 times. So you basically want to have 3 times the amount of paint that I added when I first started. But I like to go little by little because it's hard to tell when you have massive amounts of paint what color you're creating. So I like to start off with little blobs and then just keep adding more. But you want to have a substantial amount of paint here mixed, because this is going to be the base of our skin tone that we're going to add colors to tint, we're going to add colors to shade it, and then we're also just going to use it on its own to help blend everything together. And so it's important that this color, this is your main skin tone color, you want to mix enough of it. And you're aiming to mix your mid-tone skin color. So you don't want the color to be too light or too dark. You want it to be in the mid-range of all the colors that you see on your portrait. So I used a little tester here just to see if this color was good, and it looks really good to me. It's not too light, it's not too dark, so it's just right for those mid-tones. And next what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a large brush here, and I'm just going to fill in this entire area where any skin is going to be. So I'm going to fill in all the face, the ear, the neck, and the arms, all with this skin tone. And for me, this has been the most effective method for when I'm painting portraits, is to make a flat base color of the mid-tone all across the background. And then what I do is I mix the color, I mix light into the color, I mix dark into the color, and I kind of go up and down from there, but I know that at least I have the base skin tone already laid flat. And it also gets rid of that first layer that oftentimes is a little bit transparent. So I really like to do this because I know I already have a solid layer of color down, and I'm just mixing from there. And this has been, like I said, for me, the best thing to do when painting any type of skin tone. Mix a mid-tone, do a nice flat layer of that color, and then start to really shade and highlight from that base color. So I'm just filling this all in, and I'm also using quite a bit of paint here. I'm using it quite thick on the canvas. And then I just want everything to dry completely before I move on. So here it's dried, and now you can see that I have that first layer down, and now I'm going to decide what I'm going to do next. So next I'm going to transfer the rest of the features back on here. I'm going to leave the tattoo for later. I'll transfer that last, just in case I want to change the shading on the arms at all. And yeah, you want to use a different color pencil crayon as you go along here. I had started off using the green, but the green kept breaking on me, so I just switched to black. But you want it to be different from the pencil or utensil that you drew with. So for me, I drew with pencil, so I'm going to use a different color, this black here, so I can see where I have gone and which lines I have drawn and which lines I still need to draw. And with the hair here, again, you just want to do a little light reference as to where things are so that you have a reference as you go, but you don't want to be drawing every single little hair on. It's just to be an idea of where things are, and you want to keep everything to an outline. So that looks like it transferred good for me. And I'm going to keep my drawing attached to the top of the green painter's tape the whole time, just so that I can keep putting the paper down and referencing my lines and seeing how I'm doing as I go along. I think that's a really good reference tip. Keep your drawing attached so you don't have to reattach it, and you can keep seeing, how you're doing in terms of your mixing and everything and the layers that you're laying down. So here I'm adding some white to this base tone color, the base skin tone color. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by adding in my highlights. So areas that are lighter. And then I'm going to go through and do darker areas, and then I'm just going to keep going back and forth between the two. So this little speech bubble, this is the scariest part. Honestly, this is like the hardest part of the whole thing, is getting started here after you do that base layer. So just jump right in. But also you'll notice that I had tested this color against the blob of mid-tone skin tone on my tester sheet. So it's always good to have that tester sheet to see what your color is actually going to look like when you apply it to the canvas. So to start, I'm just going through and knocking in all of these highlights here. So anywhere that I notice that the skin tone has a highlight or there's a bit of a lighter area, I'm going to add this in. And the technique is I definitely add a bit of color down, and then as the color starts to fade on my brush, I kind of do a bit of a dry brush technique where I fade it out. And that's my blending tip for how I'm using the paint here. And now I'm going to grab a bit of the skin tone color again and lay it down right beside where I put that highlight down, and that's going to help to blend them together. So I'm just going to blend it right into the highlight that I put down, and then this color should dry very close to flat or close to the background color here because it's exactly the same color. And that's the advantage to using a little container, is your pre-mixed colors, they stay mixed. So yeah, I'm just going through and blending it, and this is how I blend any large areas, is I'll put down a little bit of color, so you'll see me do this in the forehead. I'll put down a little bit of highlight, and then when I want to blend it out, I'll grab some of the pre-mixed mid skin tone and then use that to blend it out back to the middle skin tone color or the base color on the portrait. So I've just laid it down there. I'm just pulling it up as I get less paint on my brush. And then I'm going to go through back with that mid-tone color and lay that down. And that's going to help blend the two. And I use the same technique when I'm laying down darker colors from the mid-tone color. I'll mix the darker color in, like I'm going to do here. So I'm going to add some black and some purple here to my palette. Sometimes I use purple as a darker color, and sometimes I use black as a shadow color. It just really depends on what type of look I want. The purple is deep enough that it still darkens the shadow color, and I kind of like the color that it gives. Now, skin tone, so to speak, skin tone, it's made up of a whole bunch of different colors because it's basically anything is reflecting light, and your skin is no different. So there are a lot of different colors that are built up in our skin, and when you're painting a portrait, You want to look at how your skin is reflecting the light around you in the different colors. So there's lots of colors in, and often there's a bit of blue in skin tone, but for the sake of this portrait, I'm going to try and keep the colors that I use to a minimum so that it'll be a good starting point for people who are new to painting portraits. But I'm going to use this purple color for my deeper tones right now, and as you can see, I lay them down and then I go back through with the mid-tone skin tone color and kind of just blend the two together where they meet. And that helps create a nice soft gradient. And you know, whenever you're making the darker tones, it always tends to look kind of weird when you start, like kind of dirty, or like the skin tone is a bit messed up a little bit, for lack of a better word. But as you go and you keep creating layers and layers, everything will start to come together. One tip is that when you're laying down the colors, you want to make sure that you don't go too light or too dark to start. So you can always deepen something, but it's a lot harder to make it lighter once you've deepened it. So you just want to make sure that, especially when you start to do your shadow areas, that you're only adding a little bit of either black or a deep purple or a deeper color, a little bit at a time. Because like I said, you can always make it darker, but it's quite a bit of a difficult feat to make it lighter. And then here I'm just going through and painting the arms in and just adding little shadow areas, little highlight areas to the arms to start. And what I do is I lay down the base of the color where it's the lightest on the arm, and then I kind of feather it out as there becomes less and less paint on my brush. And I really like using this circular round brush for this because I feel like it works really well. And because it's a bit of a larger area, this is a bit of a larger brush I'm using. And yeah, as you can see, once the color starts to dissipate, it starts to soften as I go over it with my brush like this. So next I'm just going to work on this cheek area a little bit more by adding a bit light of white here again, and then you can see that I'm going to just fade it out same way that I did before. And it's important to continue to layer different sections and work on different areas all together. So if you're going to work on the cheek, work on the whole cheek, and then you can move to the nose, and then you can move to the mouth. So any area that's covering a large span of the face, you want to work on it all at once so that you don't have little streaky lines where the paint is connecting or where the paint comes to meet another part of the face. And yeah, the trick is just layering. And then here you can see there's a bit of a highlight here at this part in the face. So I'm just going to add that in with the lighter version, and then I'm going to go back and use my skin tone on both sides of it to help dissipate and help create that gradient and mix it in. And I'm using my brush very lightly here. I know it's hard to tell the type of pressure that I'm putting on the brush, but I'm just going quite light with my paint here. And then again, back to that skin tone. So you'll see I use that base skin tone for pretty much every single part of this portrait. So I'm using it to mix my highlights, I use it to mix my shadows, I use it to mix the tattoo color and the ear, I even use bits of it in the hair. The only part where I don't use some of the skin tone is in the shirt or the clothing. But for pretty much everything else, I use that base skin tone. So make sure that when you're starting out there, you mix quite a bit of it because you're going to use it a lot. And then I'm just going to go in and add these shadows here to the arms. And then I'm going in with a smaller brush here, and I'm going to start to create a bit more of the details. So there's a bit of a detail here that's just in the arm, and then I'm going to do some of the neck details here, make them a bit darker. And then again, I'm gonna even deepen that shadow a little bit further and do some of the face lines here. And these, again, you want to start off by making them quite light, and then you can always deepen them. It's just a little bit more difficult to lighten them after you've darkened them, so just make sure that you are starting light and then always making things darker as you go. And also make sure that when you're doing your details, you want to make sure that you're using a brush that's appropriate. So if you're working on a smaller area, you want to make sure that you use a thinner brush for that smaller area. And then I'm just grabbing a tiny bit of this orangey red color because there's a little bit of shadow area under the glasses, for example, and it's not quite the same shadow color as the areas that I've painted with the purple color. So I'm just going to go in and create a little bit of that shadow area with a little bit of the red color. And this is what I mean by trying to pick up and look at the colors that are making up the skin tone and the different colors that are in that skin tone, and which colors are being reflected, and do they have a little bit more red in them? Do they have a little bit more orange? Do they have a little bit of blue? And kind of really staring at the colors and discerning what they are. All right, now we're gonna go on to painting the eyes and the eyelashes. So the eyes are pretty much closed in this portrait here. So I'm just using a very fine detail brush and just filling in that area with black. And then I'm going to go back over all the lashes and a little bit of the lash line with a gray color and a bit of a white color as well, just to add some dimension in. So if I were to just leave it all black, completely black, it would just look like one big mass. But as you can see here, I'm going in and adding little white highlights even to the eyelashes, and that makes it look a bit more realistic, as well as you can add some gray in there. And also you'll notice that I left the area where the glasses frame is between the eyelashes unpainted, and that's because I don't want it to tint the color that I'm going to put over that area. So that's just knowing about opacities and making decisions based on the paint's color's opacities. If I were to paint it black right through and then I went to go paint the eyeglasses frame on top of it, you might be able to see that black underneath, and that wouldn't look as realistic. So next I'm just going in and working on the nose a little. I'm just adding a little bit of darkness and shadow areas to the nose using that same purplish color. And then I'm going to go through and add in another layer of highlight. So this is basically white that's mixed in with my skin tone, my base skin tone there. And you'll see that I do this throughout the piece quite a few times, and that's what really helps to make it smooth and look a little bit more realistic. It's the layering. So you're going to layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and just keep going back and forth between your highlights and your deeper colors. And I'm just being really light with my brush work here, not pushing too hard. You don't want to lift up the layers that you've painted underneath, and that's what can happen if you push too hard with your brush. So you just want to go lightly, and also make sure that the layers that you're working on are over top of layers underneath that are completely dry. So you just want to make sure that the layers underneath are completely dry. That's really important, because if they're still wet or even a little tacky, you'll lift up the paint, and you definitely do not want to do that. So now I'm taking more of my mid-tone skin tone color, and I am mixing in a little bit of that orangey red color here. And then next you'll see that I'm going to add in a little bit of the purple color too, and a little bit more red here. And then I'm just going to test it to see if it is a little bit darker, and I'm going to start on the lips. So basically the lip color is a little bit of red mixed in with the skin tone color. And oftentimes people add too much red to the lips and then it starts to look unrealistic. So to make a more realistic skin tone, you want to add little bits at a time. And then oftentimes when you paint the mouths, the end corners of the mouths, the lips, are darker. They're darker color than the middle part. And then also the top lip is often quite darker than the bottom lip. So most of the time the bottom lip is lighter than the top lip. So you want to keep that in mind too. And then also you want to paint the lips in the same way that you're painting the skin in layers. So I laid down my color first, and then I'm going to go through in with this color and add it on top, and that's what helps to create the illusion of the shape of the lips, and also helps it look a little bit more realistic. And now I'm going to go through with this black color and then just mix it in with a little bit more of the skin tone, the lip color deepened a bit. So the gums are often a similar tone range and color, but a little bit more black added to them. They're a little bit darker than the lip color is, and that's what helps to create that separation. And then it's also a good exercise to paint the area between the teeth instead of painting each individual tooth itself. And this is really helpful to look at the negative space, so the space in between the shapes that you're trying to paint, and it'll really help you create that shape. So for me, I'm trying to create the proper tooth line here, and painting that negative space is really helpful to see where I'm at with that. And when you're painting teeth, you want to be as realistic or close to the actual tooth shape of the person as possible, because it'll really change the way that the person looks if you don't get the teeth right. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then when mixing the teeth, you want to mix up bone color. So you don't want the teeth to be stark white, because that's very unrealistic looking. And the teeth that are the closest inward, so the closest towards the back of the mouth, they are the darkest. And then as the teeth come across the front of the face, they get lighter and lighter as the light is able to hit them. So to create this bone color, I just mix some gray in with some yellow, and then just played around with the ratio of white and black and yellow in the tooth color. So what I'll do is I'll paint some teeth in the tones that I want to start, and then I'll go back through once that's dried, and I'll add in some highlights and some little areas that make the teeth look more realistic. And then you also can create little dashes of white on the teeth to make them pick up some of the shadow areas and that kind of thing. And often I'll paint an area like the mouth, which is what I'm going to do now, and then I'll leave it and I'll come back and make some adjustments. So here I'm just going to add in little bits of highlights on the gums. That makes them look more shiny and more realistic. And then same thing with the teeth. You can go in and take some stark white here and just add little bits on the teeth, and that makes them shiny. And then later on in the portrait, I'm going to go through and correct some of the teeth shapes. But sometimes when you're looking at something for a long time, it's kind of hard to see. So I like to go back and check in on things later. And then I'm just going to quickly paint in these piercings that this lady has. And to do that, I just did plain gray under a plain little stroke of white. So next I'm going to go in and paint the eyebrows. And here with the eyebrows, for the little part of the eyebrows that is in the glasses frame, everything that you paint in the glasses frame should be a little bit lighter than outside the glasses frame. So that's one way that you can help to create illusion when you're painting glasses. So you can see that I lightened this area that I'm painting now, just added a bit of white to it. And then the area outside the glasses will be a little bit darker. And you'll see that it starts to create this really nice illusion of glass, or how something looks underneath glass. And so I'm just using little strokes to get the eyebrows in. And I got that main eyebrow color just by mixing the red and some purple together. Just in case you miss that, here I'm mixing a similar color again here with the red and the purple. Now this one is going to be for the glasses frame. So the glasses frame is a bit of a maroon kind of tone, and so I'm actually going to make it a little bit red, more red than I made the eyebrow. And yeah, to do this you just want to go with a steady hand and go around the shape of the eyeglasses. And I like to mix in little bits of color as I go, so I'll mix in a little bit of white as I go around the frame, and that'll help to make it look realistic and look like it's catching the light at different points, which is exactly what it's doing. So, and also with glasses, sometimes I like to do a base coat of the color first, and then I'll go through on top and add in some highlights or some darker areas. So here I'm kind of mixing a couple colors together as I go, and then I'm going to go through and add some white areas. And then on the second frame here, or the second piece of glass on the eyeglasses, I'm going to start with some white, and then just by twirling my brush to pick up the red that was still on it, you can see that it just has a nice gradient effect and changes really well there. And then I'm just going to keep following through the shape. And now that it's done, I'm going to go through and add in my highlights. So make note of where the light is hitting the glasses and make sure that you reflect that on the frame itself. And that's what helps to make it look more realistic and true to life. And I'm just going to mix a little bit of a light yellow color and just add a little bit to the lid. Kind of looks like she's wearing some eyeshadow, or this area is quite a bit lighter, so I just want to make sure that I reflect that. Then I'm going to go through and mix some grayish tone here, and that will be for the metal part on the glasses frame. So with grays or any metal, I like to do a block color down first, and then I'll add a little bit of white to it or a little bit of black to it, and that's what helps create that kind of metallic dimension. So here I just added a little bit of black that I'm adding in underneath, and then you'll see I'll do the same on the end pieces here, just add in a little bit, and also on the side of the glasses here. Just want to have a really steady hand when you do that. And then I'll go through and add little highlights of white on top. And then a little bit over the top of the middle of the glasses here. And then a little bit on the side frames. And then across the arms of the glasses. Then I'm going to leave any highlights that I paint on top of the glasses till the end. I'll come back to that. So I'm going to mix up this background color here, and I chose this color because it was a nice complementary color to the skin tone colors that I have going on here. And I want to keep this color fairly light because I want the hair and the skin and everything to still stand out against it. So I'm just going to use this big thick brush to fill in the background now, and then I'll paint the hair and any other details on top of the background once it's in. So when I'm doing portraits, I often like to do the background second, and that's because I want to make sure that the colors that I choose to incorporate in the piece make sense with the background color. And sometimes you don't know that until you're closer to the end of painting a piece. So I like to do the background second for that reason. And then I'll switch to a thinner brush just to do the little areas that are closest to the face to make sure that I don't gob on too much paint with a thicker brush closer to the face. And I'm just going to go ahead here and go around this little eye shape here. And then I am going to add one highlight with this color on top of the glasses frame there, just to help incorporate this green tone into the entire piece. And then I'm also going to create a darker color here to fill in on the other side of the glasses before I do the hair. Now I've mixed quite a bit of white into this color, and that's again because the items that are inside of the glasses, you want to make sure that they're slightly lighter than the colors around them. So I'm adding in a bit more white here and lightening it up a bit, and then you'll see that when I paint the hair that goes around this eyeglass frame will be quite a bit darker, and that'll help the illusion of the glasses. And then you also don't want to forget to do the second little arm piece there, and you want to make note that it doesn't fully connect with the frame at the end there. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of this seafoam green color and then finish this little illusion all the way across the bottom. And then I'm just going to paint in the shirt that this girl's wearing. And I'm just painting this by mixing in white into some black and just having some gray here. And then you'll see that on the other side of this piece, I do add in some of the seafoam color. I like to incorporate the background colors wherever possible when I'm painting, just to help them look like they're part of the piece more incorporated. Yeah, I use the white in areas where there's highlights in the folds of the fabric, and then same thing with the black. And then I'll go through and switch to a larger brush here because I'm covering a bigger area and I don't want there to be as many brush strokes here. And then you'll see that I'm going to pick up some of the green color here and really mix it in to the shirt color here. And this is going to be more subtle after I've blended it all in, but it just helps to incorporate that background color into the piece. And also, if this was realistic, so if this person was really in front of this color, it would be reflecting on them. So I like to kind of incorporate that wherever I can. And then I'll just use a light hand to kind of smooth all those brush strokes out and incorporate them. And then I'm just going to make one of those ripples in the shirt with this light seafoam color again, as opposed to using just white. And again, that just helps to incorporate the background into the shirt and the portrait. So next I'm going to move on here. I'm going to go back to the teeth now, as I had mentioned before, and I'm going to help to just correct some of the shape of the teeth. And I noticed that in the picture there was a larger gap between the top teeth and the bottom teeth, so I'm just making that look more realistic to the photo and kind of correcting that. And I like to do that in separate stages because, just like I said before, after you've been staring at something for a long time, sometimes it's hard to see what mistakes you've made. And so if you go back in later on, you can go ahead and correct them with a fresh eye. Then I'm also adding in some shadows, and here I'm using the blackest black, but I'm just adding it into little areas that need to be darkened. That's going to help to get that full range of color in this portrait, from light to dark. Then I'm going to go through and just add some of those tooth highlights and just change the shape just ever so slightly with the white. And then I'm grabbing my skin tone, which I use throughout the entire piece multiple times, and I'm just going to go ahead and mix a bit of a darker color here and a little bit of this orange color, and this is going to be for the gum area. So I just want to create a darker area between the top lip and the gums there. So I'm just going ahead through that, and I'm using the same colors that I used to make those darker tones and a little bit of that orangey color. And now we're going to move on to the hair. So to start the hair, I like to make a background color for all the highlights of the hair to sit on. So for that, I'm basically just mixing together a black and a brown color, interchanging and mixing along the way, and I'm going to be filling in the entire area where the hair is full. So I'm not bringing this color out to areas where I'm going to use little wispies and where the hair kind of separates from the head, but from the area where the hair is the most dense and the shadows are the blackest underneath, I'm going to go ahead and just lay a layer of black down to start. And that way, when I'm painting shadows and different little curls going in different directions, there's already a shadow underneath them and we're not going to see the plain white canvas paper. So this is a good technique just to layer down a base layer onto the canvas before you continue on with doing the hair details and picking up all the little different curls that this lady has. And then the next thing that I'm going to do once I have that down is you'll see that I left an area between the temple and the hair color that I let down there, the shadow color. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix some little baby hair colors and I'm going to lay those down all across that area. Now you can see that there's a faint pencil line where I had mapped out where the hairline starts for myself. And so I'm going to use that as a guide as I lay down these little baby hairs here. And I'm doing that so that I'm not going to be painting every single little hair that this lady has, but I do want the hairline to kind of seamlessly blend into where her hair starts to get nice and thick away from her scalp. So this technique will really help that happen, kind of marry the two together. And then anywhere there were little wispy tiny hairs, I started to fill those in as well. Then next I'm going to mix some of these little highlight colors and show you how I'm going to create all those little curls. So you can see that I'm using a thicker brush here and just starting to get all the little twirls and curls knocked in, and I'm using a lighter gray color here, and I'm just going to mix in different amounts of black, different amounts of brown, and different amounts of white all through the brush as I go in and create these little wispy lines. And I've switched to a thinner brush here so I can start to do these little curls and make sure that they're a little bit more defined in this area here at the back of the head. And you can see that this is where I decided not to lay down that black underneath layer because I want the background color to show through here. And that just goes to show where the hair is densest and or more dense, and where the hair is starting to come away from the head. That's what makes it look a little bit more realistic. And then here I'm mixing the skin tone in with some brown, and that's to kind of lighten up the area as it starts to go and the hair starts to go into the head. So where it's lightest is the area where the hair kind of meets the head, or the hairline is, so to speak. And so if I were to make that too dark to start off with, it would look very unrealistic. So to make it look a little bit more realistic, I use a bit of the skin tone mixed in there, and that also gives the illusion of areas of hair that aren't super compact or that don't have as much hair. And at the hairline, your hair starts to thin out a little bit, so I wanted to make sure that that was conveyed through the paint. And then also there's this little area where her hair is gathered with a little bit of a bobby pin or clip, and I really liked how that looked, so I wanted to make sure that I added that in there as well. And you'll see later on that I'll add in that little pin detail. And then you just want to follow the image, follow your reference as to where there's light areas and where there's dark areas, and then just kind of fill those in. And you always want to use your brush in a manner that's going to emulate what you're trying to show. So for example, these thin hairs that I'm doing here, I'm switching to a thin brush and I'm doing some quick kind of light strokes with my brush, and that helps give the illusion of the hairs that I'm trying to create here. And you just want to do the same thing on the other side of the face here. You just want to fill in the little hairs as you go. And then I decided to switch to this thicker brush for some of these more defined curls. And I like this brush because you can it can make a nice kind of finer point or thinner area of it, so to speak, that I can use to make these curls that I really want to accentuate. And so here I'm really going to go through and use the white to make these little highlights on the hair kind of pop. And any areas of the hair where the light is hitting, I use white and a lighter color and kind of really make sure that I can show that. And often when you're painting hair, you don't want the paint to be mixed completely, because it's the little differences in the colors that will help make the hair look realistic. So I often don't use flat color. I use a mix of colors. Like as you can see here, I added a little bit of the background color in there, and that helps to make it look more realistic. And then here I'm just adding a highlight on that bobby pin that's holding her hair together, and just picking up some of the little highlights that you'll be able to see on her curls just by using this nice fine brush here. Lastly, we're going to work on her tattoo. So I just gone ahead and drawn a really loose outline of her tattoo onto her skin there, and then I grabbed a bit of this blue color because she has a nice blue tattoo here, and I'm just going to fill it in. Now when you paint tattoos have lots of the skin tone color coming through, so you want to make sure that you mute down all your colors by using the same skin tone that you've been using for that person and mixing those into the colors. So if I were to just draw this straight blue color onto her skin tone, it would look very unrealistic. But as I mix in her skin tone color into the colors of the tattoo itself, it starts to look more realistic, and it starts to look more like it's on her skin as opposed to just being slapped right on top. It looks more like it's a part of her. And I even do that same thing when I outline this piece in black. So to start, I do all the underpaintings of this blue color and the skin tone, but then I go through and I outline it, which helps to make it look realistic and more like the actual tattoo she has. But even when I do that, I don't do the black straight from the tube. I make sure that I mix in the skin tone color into the tattoo as well, into the black outline to mute it back a bit, because it would look very unrealistic if I just put a stark black line all around here. So you can see it kind of makes it look like a bit of a gray line, and that's more true to how her actual tattoo looks. And then even when I'm done outlining it, I go through and I add a bit more of that skin tone color just straight on top to try and emulate these areas where her skin is peeking through, or the tattoo was blended into her skin and there's more of her skin color showing. So that's kind of some tips on how to make a more realistic looking tattoo. Is make sure that you still have some skin tone peeking through. Make sure that you mute all your colors down with some skin tone color so that they aren't looking quite as vibrant or intense. And that's what really helps. And then also here I'm using this fine brush so that I can get in some of those nice tiny details. I'm just adding a little more skin tone here in areas where I feel like I've lost it completely. And yeah, that concludes our portrait. I hope that you guys learned a lot of tips here that you can use and take into your own practice here, and that this piece was really helpful in you learning how to paint a portrait. Thanks so much for being here. Okay guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe for more videos from me, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. If you want to post your images of your paintings, don't forget to tag me on Instagram at CoreyJ, and I look forward to seeing everything. That's it for today's video. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.